Hello guys and welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a video on my top 5 spoken word poems. I've been wanting to do this for such a long time. It's just, I never got around to it, and then I moved. But today I'm going to talk about 5 pieces that I've loved since last year December and this year January, so I discovered them like between those times, and I still listen to them today and I still love them as much as I did the first time I heard them, so I just wanted to share some of those. The first one is What's Wrong with Touching by Hollie Poetry or Hollie McNish. I first heard of this in a spoken word playlist on Spotify, and that's kind of what set me off down the road of discovering a lot of these. And the first time I heard it, I absolutely loved it. So there are actually 2 versions of this. There's one where she just speaks the words and it's perfectly fine, but the version I'm talking about is one that has the backing track of it. So I think the album is called Verses, I'm not too sure. And Verses is either the one with the instrumental or it's the normal one. Basically there are 2 versions. One has music behind it and the other is just her speaking. But definitely What's Wrong with Touching, the version with music, is one of my ultimate top favourites. This poem is actually in her poetry collection Plum, which I've spoken about on this channel before because I remember picking it up in a haul. And I had already heard the spoken word version of it before I picked it up, so reading it was a nice little pleasure as well. But for me, I think the music makes this poem like so much better. It makes the performance just like outstanding. So this poem is basically Hollie saying, as the title suggests, what's wrong with touching. She's talking about the fact that there seems to be been this decline in people getting to know each other, people, you know, just like exploring each other's bodies. It seems now we're in this age where people just send like intimate photos and don't really take that time to get to know a person and explore them physically. I know that sounds really weird. You probably think like everyone's out here having loads of sex, but it's that sort of thing where it's sex but it's not actually intimacy. But it's also about a little bit more than that. She's also talking about the fact that, like, you know, what's wrong with expressing sort of romantic love, and talking about how like technology seems to be sort of allowing us to sort of decline in the way we sort of pursue people. You know, we're sending like text messages instead of, I don't know, picking up the phone and seeing people. It's things to do with that. For me, the reason why I love this poem is the imagery it conjures up in my head. I feel like it has such an essence, like the way she speaks and the ideas that she talks about. It really sort of allows me to conjure up this wonderful image in my head. She also speaks a little bit in French in this, which I think adds to that little bit of allure of like romanticism. I have no idea what she says, but I imagine it's among the same lines of the rest of the poem. I think it's just a really powerful piece. It really like just gets me in my feels, and I don't know, the way she speaks and the way she performs it along with the music, I think it's a match made in heaven basically. I'm going to link all the poems I speak about down below, but definitely encourage you to give this one a listen. The next poem I'm going to speak about is actually one that I would say is powerful. I know I said the Hollie Poetry one was powerful, but I think this is like the, you know, image of powerful. And it's by Atta and it's called I'm Nobody's, and then you'll see the full title. He's basically talking about the use of that word. He's basically talking about black people trying to reclaim that word and, you know, flip it on its head. He's basically saying we need to sort of stop this whole thing of reclaiming it and using it so widely in sort of music that goes out to the mainstream. He speaks about slavery in this poem. He speaks about Stephen Lawrence, who was a kid who died from racism essentially. I know that he was killed by guys, and he was just saying how basically the last word Stephen Lawrence would have heard before he died was that word. So why are you so intent on reclaiming it and sort of using it when it's never been a good thing? You know, he's talking about like those would have been the words your ancestors heard, etc, etc. What I also liked about this poem is the fact that he put it into context with music that very popular rappers, so like Kanye, I don't know, I know one of them is Kanye because the title of one of his songs is In Paris, and he sort of puts it into context with that, saying that he, you know, he is not any of those things, and then repeats the titles that they have. And I think that's probably just good in terms of it being able to resonate with an audience who listens to music that's very current today. I think the poem overall just has a really, really powerful message, and Dean speaks speaks with such sort of grace, but also with such presence. And since I had the idea to do this video, I started following him for some reason, because I really follow Hollie, and I don't know the rest of them. And he's just so into the spoken word scene. And since moving up here, I haven't been to anything that's like remotely spoken word or anything like that. So I've definitely started looking into events that I can go to, just so I can get back into that scene, because I feel like when you go to spoken word or performance poetry events, you get to hear a lot of poetry around this. So I think it's sometimes super important to go to them to remind yourself that people are speaking out about these things, and people are speaking about all sorts of things in poetry. It's not just things that you find in sort of printed books, even though I think Atta is actually a printed poet as well. So we're going back to another person I've already mentioned, and that is Hollie Poetry. This is her poem Mathematics, which I absolutely love. I've heard this poem before, but I can't remember if it was her that I heard perform it and I just didn't know who she was at the time, or if someone else performed it and then I was like, oh, okay. But again, when I was going through that Spotify playlist, it was one of the ones I listened to, and this is just the plain version where she speaks. This poem essentially just focuses on sort of like racism, immigration, xenophobia, and talking about that sort of nostalgia that a lot of British people have for like the good old days, and she's just saying that's basically rubbish. Like, there's a lot of talk of, you know, this country was so great before, you know, everyone came over in their boats and just ruined it, and she's just saying, actually, that's literally not how it happened. And I think it's so easy to have this like sort of romantic view of the past, as if, you know, people from the Caribbean and from India weren't invited to fight in the war and, you know, promised loads of things, and that's actually why they ended up coming over. But a lot of people just think all these people are just rushing into their country. So it's a poem that focuses around that sort of history that is, you know, not very clear to most people. And she like touches on it specifically in the poem when the guy is sort of saying all that sort of stuff, and she's like, how do you know that? And he was like, because it's a fact. And she's like, yeah, but how do you know that? Which I think is probably something that is just universal, rather than it being something that's actually truthful. It's more like, well, this is how I feel and this is what I see, therefore it is fact. The whole concept that's running through the poem is the fact of mathematics, that, you know, one person comes over from another country and takes a job from someone who's British, and she says, no, your maths is wrong, because a lot of people who come to this country add to the economy. A lot of people who come to this country, you know, build shops and, you know, employ people, or they bring in another friend who then brings, like, helps. It's just basically not this whole thing of that person having a job is taking it away from you. And she actually says that in the poem. You know, she says, it's not as if that person was to go home, they turn around and give that job to you. It's also a very good look at sort of the political sort of party and actually where that blame lies, but she doesn't really touch that deeply on politics, or really at all. But it is a sort of focus on that, as like, it doesn't lie at the foot of the person coming into the country. Actually, there are a whole bunch of laws and reasons as to why you probably don't have a job. And that's essentially how she ends her poem, saying, you know, it's nice to have someone to blame your lack of jobs upon, but immigration isn't the thing to blame. People who are not British are not the reason to blame for why you don't have a job. I think it's just such an important and powerful poem that needs to be heard by so many people, but I'm glad it's like being written by someone who is a middle-class working woman who recognises that this is a view that a lot of people have. The next poem I'm going to speak about is Search Party by George the Poet. I feel like I haven't seen George the Poet around in a while, like, unless it's like a bank advert. I haven't seen him around in a while, but regardless, this is still one of my absolute favourites. I haven't listened to a lot of his poetry before. I've been aware of who he is and seen stuff around, and I know he was in a track with Naughty Boy that I really liked. But this was also on that playlist, and I listened to it and I really, really liked it. And when I was just looking up about the poem, I realised, actually it was when I was looking up a poem, but also a video in one of my courses for uni. It was talking about how publishers work with their authors, and he was in it, and it had, in the background, it had his book Search Party, and it's the name of this particular poem. But I didn't realise this whole time that I've been listening to it that that's been the name of his book and his poetry collection. So it now makes a lot more sense to me what he's saying in the book. in the book, in the poem. This poem is basically George talking about his upbringing and how he owes a lot of his success and the way he learned to speak and the way he learned to sort of rap and do spoken word to people that he grew up around, and therefore he's so grateful to them, and you know, he doesn't see why they can't come up to the top with him because they're the ones that helped him to grow. And I think it's just such an important topic, especially when it comes to like black people or people of colour. There's this thing where, you know, you fight so hard to make it in a world that's, you know, mainly white dominated. You get there and you sort of just want to be the only person because you've worked so hard. But it has to be this thing where you have to bring other people in so that the playing field can be level, so that it's mixed. Or not as in level for that person, but it's just so that other sort of people of colour going into other industries see that it's not just a white dominated industry, that they can also be in that industry and they don't have to be the only one. So for me, I see it as touching on so many little things. He might not have meant it in that way, but I feel like that's partially also what he's talking about. But he's also talking about the fact that obviously he comes from I think in like sort of underprivileged background. I know he went to Cambridge or Oxford and all that stuff, but his actual upbringing, and you know, he's saying like, you know, there's still people in the ends that are just as good as him that haven't made it out, so like people need to stop sleeping on them. But it's also a poem about the sort of wider political situation. So when I was looking up about this, it was sort of released during the time when the PM elections were going on. I don't remember what year it was now, but he's basically saying, you know, I have a manifesto, which is what I think his actual poetry collection is about. He's saying that his poetry collection is a manifesto that, you know, believes like in inequality, sort of human policies, social housing, you know, all these things that most politicians really don't care about. Obviously it's just a poem, but he's really trying to bring forward the people that society ignores. He says this line in it like, I don't believe you're sort of null and void just because you're unemployed. And basically, yeah, that's what he's talking about. People who are not seen, people who don't have a voice. Like he says in the beginning of his poem, you know, in the beginning of his poem, his job as a poet is to be sort of the spokesperson for the people. I just think it's a really great poem, and it's actually made me want to pick up his collection just to see what the rest of it is about. This has a little bit of singing in it as well, so I kind of like it. He does a little bit of, you know, some raspy singing in here and there. But I definitely think it's a really important poem, and I think it just shows a lot of respect for his roots and his ends, and you know, I think people watching that would have appreciated that. The final poem I'm going to be speaking about today is Spare Change by B.Franklin with Soham D on the vocals. This poem is a poem about homelessness, and oh my god, it's absolutely heartbreaking. B.Franklin has done it from the view of a homeless person, and it's just so real, so raw, and every time I listen to it, I feel like I should be there doing something, which is what I think poetry is supposed to do. The poem basically puts you in the sort of mind headspace of a homeless person and talks about, you know, the way he's judged by society, the things he has to do in order to sort of survive. And one of the things that absolutely breaks my heart every single time I hear it, like not even in just this poem, but in general, but you know, having to commit a petty crime just so he can find somewhere to sleep for the night and just have some food, and it's just like, that's absolutely freaking heartbreaking. And he also talks about his history, so you know, like the family that he has, and I think it's so good that he did that, because I think sometimes it's so easy to just think, you know, they're just this singular person, and you don't really think about the story that they might have had, the family that they might have had. So I think it's really good that B.Franklin sort of sat there and sort of painted a family for him. I think it's just a really powerful account, and like I said, it just gets me in my feels, and I'm just, every time I listen to it, I'm just like, this is so awful. Like, I couldn't imagine someone sitting there thinking all that sort of stuff, and then, you know, we're all walking past like having these awful judgments, or just thinking, you know, like they're going to use the money for drugs or whatever, and it's just that sort of viewpoint and that sort of acknowledgement of the thoughts that we have about homeless people, I think that really hits home, and just knowing everything else that they must possibly be feeling, and then to have that sort of judgment on top of it, I'm just like, oh my god. So yeah, I absolutely love that poem. The only criticism I have of that poem is either the speech or the speaking in it is too soft, or music is too loud, but at times it can be really hard to hear what B.Franklin is saying. So I'm sure there are parts of the poem that I've missed and I don't really understand because I can't really hear them. That's my only little bit of criticism. So yeah, that is me done talking about my top 5 favourite spoken word poems. I have been to such good spoken word events in London, primarily Jordan's and Tung Fu. They are both held in Rich Mix in London in Shoreditch. Jordan's is good because it's like an open mic night, so they have people performing that they have like on the list, but then you go in, people put their names in a hat and then they just choose, I think, like 6 people and people just get up and perform. So it's great in that sense. And then Tung Fu is amazing. That's when I saw Hollie McNish, and it was just such a unique experience because they basically have like a lineup of poets and then they give the DJ sort of direction for the vibe of their poem. They give the person doing the imagery stuff for the vibe of their poem. Sorry, not the DJ, there's an on stage band, sorry. So they give them the direction for things they want in the sound of their poem. Is there another one? I think that's just it. You have a projector that is projecting images behind the artist. You have the band on stage, like sort of trying to play music to go along with the poetry, and then you have the poet performing. So definitely amazing. So I'm looking forward to finding some spoken word events between Glasgow, Edinburgh, or wherever near where I live. But yes, that is all from me today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any spoken word performances that you really like. There are a couple of performances that I found like across YouTube that I really like. So I might do a video on that, but there's not that many. So yeah, if you do have any links to videos on YouTube of people performing, I would love to see those. And yeah, I will catch you in my next video. Bye.